Begin the current Daf, Yoma Daf Pei Aleph, begin 6 lines down to the top of the Yommi, where we continue and finish off explaining the halacha of the previous Mishnah regarding the halachas of the Inuyim of not eating and not drinking on Yom Kippur. Shiur corresponds to concept in Cheskel to end the Daf. Joining today's Daf. This is just a final reminder. We are in our last leg over here on the Raise It campaign for one of the sides, of course, Kalzich and Cheskel, where we host a shiur. This is also, we're finishing up a Raise It campaign for our shul in Tom's River, Grand River Shtibel, which is going to be a huge building, and we have our goal here of reaching 300,000. Baruch Hashem, a lot of people have given, so we just encourage everyone. This is my HTTPS, I don't know how to say this, / whatever it is, www. Grand River Shul building, Rabbi Schwartzberg. So this is my page. So someone who's going to contribute towards that. Somebody who's going to discuss in today's daf are one who eats or performs malacha on Yom Kippur b'shoigig, what the halacha is regarding liability, the concept of Teisus Yom Kippurim and its source in the term B'chlal, the halacha of Teisus Shabbos, Teisus Yom Tov. Behel Mechad is the concept that if someone does something in the same lapse of awareness, although he does more than one act, he's going to be liable only one chatos. Teisus Yom Kippurim is the halacha that's the source of this halacha of Teisefes, which is that not only do you have to keep the actual Yom Tov itself, but you have to add on before and after from the halachas of the not doing malacha and of Inu. So begin the current Daf Pei Aleph, 6 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where we quote from the Mishnah that said, someone eats and drinks, so each one of those is one of the Chamishi Inuyim on Yom Kippurim, and however, they don't combine together. So if you eat a shiur of kesebes, you're chayv achila. If you drink the amount of malay lugma, you're chayv for drinking, but they don't combine. Says Gemara, Man Tana, who is a Tana by Mishnah that not going to combine? So interesting, the comparison the Gemara makes it to. Amar of Chizri says, B'machlekes, it's regarding a disagreement that we learned somewhere else. That's what Shanuya, that's what we learned here in our Mishnah. Meaning it's not going according to everyone. Rather, it's Rabbi Shloimy, it's going like Rabbi Shua. Why? Where do we find this halacha that eating and drinking is not going to combine? That's Rabbi Shua. Did not learn the Mishnah Masechtas and Gila. It says like this. Kalala Rabbi Shua says, which obviously there are those who disagree with him. He says, Kol shetumasei b'shiuri shav. Wherever you have two things, its tuma and its measurement is the same. So, for example, let's say 2 half-olive sizes of dead people, from 2 dead people, or from 2 dead carcasses, or from 2 half of lentils of 2 shratzim. Where, when we say tumasim, what do we mean? We mean the amount of time that it's going to make a tumah for. That's what it means, the severity of a tumah. If it's overnight, if it's for 7 days, what's the shiur of its tumah? So the time, the tumasim means the time, how long is it going to be tummy? And their shiur is the same, which they both have the same shiur, whether it be a lentil, whether it be a kazayas, whatever the halacha is, they're going to have the same. Then they're mitzvah. So if they have the same tumah and they have the same shiur, then they combine. But let's say it's tumaseh below shiur. Let's say, for example, a sheretz and nevela. Both of them have the same tumah. What do you mean they have the same tumah? They both make tumah only for that evening, until the evening. But the shiur is not the same, because nevela is mitamed the shiur b'kazayis. But the nevela, the sheretz is the size of a hadash, of a lentil. So the tumah is the same. It's mitamed the same amount of time, but the shiur is different. Or let's say shiur b'lei tumaseh. Let's say they have the same shiur, not the same tumah. So, for example, a dead person and an nevela, both of them are mitamed the size of a kazai. So, if an olive-sized piece of an nevela or the dead person touches, it's going to contaminate. But the dead person his tumah is a tumah of 7 days. The tumah of a nevela is only mitamed till the evening, so they don't have the same tumah. But they have the same shiur. Or let's say loy tumah of shiur. Let's say they don't have the same tumah and not the same shiur. Then says Rabbi Shua emet starfim. They don't combine. Oh, so who is the one that says even if they have the same halacha, but they don't have the same shiur, that they're not going to combine? That's Rabbi Shua, who he says that even if they have the same tumah but not the same shiur, it's not going to combine. So here by achila and shtia and Yom Kippurim, they don't have the same shiur. Achila is kesebes, and drinking is malay lugmav. So since it's different shiurim, that's what's not going to combine, and that must be like Rabbi Shua. So Rav Nachman says no. You could even say it's going like the Rabbanan that disagree with Rabbi Shua, and they hold that even if it has a different shiur, it will combine. Why? Because where do we find the Rabban that say that it's going to combine even when there's two different species? Ella inyan tuma. That's regarding the laws of tuma, which they disagreeing over there in Me'ilah. Why? Because the shem tumachari, ultimately, it's all the halacha category of tuma. So even though it has a different shiur, it's still going to combine. We explained on the previous daf that the concept of how much is the shiur is about how much is it going to calm someone down not to be afflicted. The high and eating and drinking, together combined, doesn't calm a person down. Like we said, it has to be a keseves. No matter what size person you are, no matter what type of food that you ate, that's the amount that's going to calm you down. If you're going to add drinking to the amount of eating that you're missing, it's not going to calm a person down. Even the Rabbanan would agree that it would not combine, and therefore it doesn't have to be just like a bishul. But the same discussion we just had between these two different opinions of Amaram, we have similarly Omer Shlakish. Same machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. Omer Shlakish, he says, he holds like that of the first opinion we mentioned in the Gemara of Rav Chisda. That yes, Rabbi Shuhi, the Tana Mishnah is only Rabbi Shuhi that holds that eating and drinking are not going to combine because they have different shiur. It's not like going to Mishnah Kalam Yeshua B'chulu that Rabbi Shuhi holds that if it's not the same shiur, it's not going to combine. Rabbi Yechon, no, he disagrees like Rav Nachman disagreed in the first machlekes. Afil Temer Rabban, he even says like Rabban. Ad Kala Kam Rabban Hasan, where do we find Rabban over there saying it's going to combine even though it's different shiur, Me'lein and Tumah, because it's ultimately both have shem Tumah. Over here by Yom Kippur, is about calming a person down. It's not going to calm a person down. So basically, we have two different machlekes Amaram, Rav Chisda and Rish Lakish on the one hand, Rav Nachman Yechon on the other hand, regarding is our Mishnah specifically like a bishul, or is it even going to be like Rabban? Now we continue with the next Mishnah, continue on the theme of the previous Mishnah of the inui of not eating on Yom Kippur. It says the Mishnah, Achol v'shasa b'hal mechar. Someone ate and drank in one lapse of awareness. So in the chayv al-chatasachas. So the halacha generally is hell method is even if you do one avera many times, but if it's one lapse of awareness, you didn't know about it, so then you're only going to be chayv one chatas. Now here you ate and drank. Why are you going to be chayv only one chatas? Because like Rashi says, because it's one name. Meaning even though it doesn't help to combine, because that's from Yisuvei Daite, but ultimately achila and shtil learned up from the same pasuk. It tells you not to eat, and drinking is included in eating. So therefore it's the same isser. And if you did it one lapse of awareness, you're going to be chayv only one chatas. In contrast, let's say you ate and you did a malacha on Yom Kippur, which are two different shemois of Isser because it's learned out from two different verses. Then you have two different chatois, even though it's a one lapse of awareness, because again, it's two different acts of Isur. Now continues the Mishnah. If you ate things that are not fit to be eaten, they're not edible, and you drank things which are.
You mentioned that Meloch is different. What about the other Inuim? That Rechitze, Sicher, is that because if it's an Inu, it's in the same posuk?
Right.
It doesn't mention, it's interesting, it goes to
Right.
Meloch now.
Right, it goes to Malacha. Right.
What about that? This is an Inu. If you listen to some Shesachim, it's in one posuk, and it's not, it's something that Shmiyah is Kedai.
Right.
There's no Chatas on that. On, let's say, the other Inuim, there's no Chatas on it.
Right, we said that the only ones that they're rice would be Chil and Shtia. According to some, it's machlekes.
So the other Inuim is not, what's no Chatas, is not Menatoire?
Machlekes Rishayim.
If it's Menatoire.
Because it doesn't say anywhere about anything about eating, drink. It just says 5 times the word inu. So we learn out. Right. Right. So it is machlekes Rishayim actually, but the rice is the Rabbanan. Right, but it says that the chorus would only be on eating and drinking. Right. So it says the Mishnah, so if you eat foods that are not edible, or you drink beverages that are not fit to drink, or let's say b'shasa tzira murius, you drink brine or the fish gravy, so then you're going to be exempt, because again these are things that are not fit to, not considered an act of achilo or of shtia. Now the Gemara asks, Amar Shlakish, she says, it's an interesting thing. We don't find the Torah giving you, it says about the punishments, but it doesn't tell you as hard. Generally, anyway, in the Torah, you have to give a warning, you have to give the prohibition, and then it says the punishment. How come it doesn't say the prohibition regarding the halacha of afflicting yourself on Yom Kippur? So it says the Gemara, interesting answer. It says, Mishun Deli Efshur, it's not possible. Why isn't it possible? Because really from a practical reason, how are you going to write it? What do you mean? So it says the Gemara. You say, okay, just say straight out. Say in the Torah, you're not allowed to eat. No, because achila b'kezayis. Ichila, the word achila connotes the size of an olive. And the Torah, however, doesn't hold you liable for a kazayis. It's only when it calms you down, which is a kesef agasa. So we couldn't tell you don't eat because then you would have thought it means a kazayis. Oh, so what are you going to say? You should say, okay, don't be afflicted. Well, that for sure is not going to work because that's kol mashma. That sounds like to go ahead and eat. Loisuuna means not be afflicted, means get up and eat breakfast. So Master Rabbi however, he asked, he says, I understand. Why couldn't the Torah just write, Yishamer, be careful. Pen loisuuna, maybe you're not going to be afflicted. Maybe you're going to come to a situation not going to be afflicted, which means to say that you're going to violate and you're going to eat. Says the Gemara, no, if that's the case in the Fishul Lavi, then you're going to have too many lavin. Because the word Yishamer and pen, both of them connote not doing. Now, we only want one negative prohibition because maybe the Torah didn't want to have more than one lav for Inui. So we couldn't write Hishamer pen because then you would have said there's two negative prohibitions. So Maskal Rabbi says, I understand. Why didn't Torah just say be careful in the midst of Inui? That would have been one Hishamer, not Hishamer pen. Says Gemara, no, that would have been the case. Hishamer, the lav, when you have the word Hishamer of a negative prohibition, like for example, Daram Chavdal, it says Hishamer b'neged tzuras, be careful by the neged tzuras, meaning not to cut off the baharis. So it's telling you to be careful in what not to do. That's a lav, that's a negative prohibition. But Hishamer da'aseh, if you tell me to be careful regarding a positive act of afflicting, which is said in the positive form, that's aseh. That would be a positive command. We're not coming to tell you a mitzvah say, we're coming to tell you a mitzvah's license say. We couldn't tell you Yishamer b'mitzvah say, then that would have connoted that a mitzvah say. Which Taisa says, although Rabbi Yechon and the Menachah says that it's actually also lav, but here we're going to Rish Lakish, who we're trying to explain according to him why you couldn't say any words of the Azhara, because it's going to tell us something that would not mean to say. But Master Rashi, he asked, what do you mean, Nichtav al Tasamanina? Why can you write, don't remove yourself from the affliction? So the Gemara Kasha, it's not a tiyufta, but it definitely is a difficulty why I couldn't have written that, which would have been Azhara. If Ina would have told us clearly a negative prohibition. However, says the Gemara, Tanya Maisila, but the Tana of a Brisa, he learns that halacha of Azhara, of prohibition of Inui, Mahacha from here, which is a whole Brisa, and in the Brisa we'll see this source of this halacha of Azhara Ba'inui. First, the Brisa starts over the Pasuk Mamidbar. It says in the Torah, Ve'inisim es nafshei seichem, you should afflict yourself on Yom Kippurim. Kol malacha leisasu, you don't do any malacha on Yom Kippurim. So now, it's comparing Inui to malacha. Says the Brisa, Yochel Yehei Anish, you would think that there would be punishment of Karas, Al Teseves Malacha. Meaning, if you don't add on from the weekday to the Kodesh to Yom Kippurim, to stop doing work a little bit before Yom Kippurim, which is called Teseves Yom Kippurim, you would think that you would get a punishment of Karas, just like you get for doing Malacha on Yom Kippurim, you would get for Teseves Yom Kippurim, Einish doing Malacha. Anyone who's going to do malacha in the essence of this day, what does it mean it tells us only if you do malacha on the essence of the day itself, is there a punishment of cars. But it's not going to be punishment of cars on doing added malacha, meaning on the additional part of Yom Kippur. So essentially we're going to be talking about two things. We're talking about Inui and malacha, which are both in the pasuk, and we're going to talk about the Tesefes regarding the Einish part and the Azara part, because again, every Isra in the Torah has Einish and Azara. And here we're talking about two things in the Pasuk, we're talking about Inui and Malacha. So we just spoke about the Tesefes Yom Kippurim regarding Malacha that you don't get cars. Now, Yochel Lo Yehei Ernish Cars Al Tesefes Malacha. Okay, you would think maybe you don't get a punishment of cars on the additional part of Yom Kippurim regarding doing Malacha. But you would get cars, a punishment of cars for the, let's say, an hour, 20 minutes before Yom Kippurim, that if you're not afflicting yourself, that you would get cars for that. The pasuk teaches no. And actually on Amud Beis, meaning we didn't even introduce the concept of Tesefes Yom Kippurim. Amud Beis, we're going to see a brisa that actually gives the source for this. This brisa is really after that. After we know a concept of Tesefes Yom Kippurim, now the brisa is saying, well, okay, there's halacha Tesefes Yom Kippurim. Maybe I would think you get Einish for Inui and for Malacha. That's what the brisa is coming to say, that no, there's no Einish for not keeping Malacha on Erev Yom Kippurim Tesefes, and there's no punishment even on Inui. How do I know this? Because it says any soul that's not going to be afflicted on this essence of this day is going to get karas, which teaches only if the essence of the day itself you don't keep the Inui, then there's going to be punishment of karas. But the Einash karas al Tesefes, there's no punishment of karas on the addition a part of Yom Kippurim that you're not keeping as Inui. Okay, so that took care of the Tosefes, as we have over here, no einish for Tosefes malacha and no einish for Tosefes inui. But now the Brisa continues, okay, but yochel lo yehi b'chlal einish, you would think maybe there's no category of punishment. Al yehi muzer, but there would be at least a prohibition of a negative prohibition, which gives you a punishment of lashes. No kares, but maybe lashes, al Tosefes malacha, for the additional Erev Yom Kippurim part of not doing malacha. Let me know. Even that you don't have. Because it says in the Pasuk, no malacha should be done the essence of this day, which tells us the negative prohibition of lo yisasu is only be'etzem yemazeh. Ali tu mishal yemu muzon. The essence of the day is what you have a prohibition. But you don't have a prohibition on the additional parts of not doing malacha. Okay. You would think fine. We just put a source that you're not going to have asara of tesefes malacha. But you would have asara of tesefes of inui. This is the Brisa. No, but then logic would tell us you can't say that. Why? Because if regarding doing malacha, it's not a Yom Kippur law. It applies to every Shabbos and Yom Tov. And yet, there's no prohibition on the Tosefes Yom Kippurim of Hazara of not doing malacha. So afflicting oneself, which doesn't apply on any other day of the year besides Yom Kippurim and Deraisa, doesn't apply Shabbos, doesn't apply Yom Tovim. In addition, isn't it a kavochem that for sure it's not going to apply on the Tosefes Yom Kippurim part? So that concludes this part of the Brisa, which just brought a source that there's no einish for neither malacha or inoy and Tosefes, and neither is there even azhara. There is a halacha of Tosefes Yom Kippurim that we're going to see on the base, but there's no einish of kares, and there's no azhara even of malchus of Tosefes for malacha and inoy. But now the Brisa says of azhara, and this
the Gemara established that there is an Isra to say this though, right? So yeah.
No, they didn't. We're going to see that on the base. The Gemara on the base is going to bring the source of Tosefes Yom Kippurim. Here it's past that already.
We're assuming it is
exactly. We're assuming that there is such halacha, and we're saying, okay, you would think it would be einish, you would think that's all. We're saying that no. But now the Brisa gets to the point that why we brought in this Brisa. The Brisa says, which we had said we don't have a passage that says it. The Brisa is actually going to bring the source, a prohibition, a warning for afflicting oneself on the day of Yom Kippurim itself. Lo lamadu. We didn't learn where that even says in the Torah. I mean, now where do we know that there's a prohibition of saying that you're supposed to afflict yourself on the day itself? So, and that says the Brisa like this: Lo Yomar onish b'malacha. You shouldn't tell me that there's a punishment for doing malacha Yom Kippurim. Why? Because the Kamamina, I would learn it out from the halacha of affliction. Why would I learn it out? Because like this, the following reasoning. Where the halacha of Inui doesn't apply every Shabbos and Yom Tov. And yet still, if you violate that halacha, onish kares is the punishment of kares for, let's say, eating and drinking Yom Kippur, which halacha of inui. So malacha shenai hegis b'Shabbos Yom Tovim. So doing prohibited work, which is on every Shabbos and Yom Tov, which is much more global, like koshkin, isn't it all the more so if one violates it, one's going to get kares? So lamanema. So why does it say in the Torah on the einish of kares for malacha? I could have known it from inui. Some mufne, it's extra, superfluous. What's it doing over there? Lahakish v'ladin min gzeir Shabbat, to compare and to learn out from it as a gzeir Shabbat. What's the comparison? Nema einish b'inoi, it says punishment by affliction, meaning if you don't afflict yourself on Yom Kippur. V'nem einish v'malacha says einish v'malacha, which again is unnecessary to teach me comparison of its law of punishment to the law of punishment of inoi. What is the comparison? Mamalacha, just like by prohibited work, loy onish al-kin hizer, it doesn't give you a punishment besides. Because it doesn't give it to you without a prohibition, meaning the einish comes first with azara. It says in the Torah not do malacha Yom Kippurim. So too the punishment of the inui also has, and that's in the same pasuk there of, like we quoted at the beginning of the Brisa, that's also telling that there's azhara, and that's the source that there's azhara by inui on Yom Kippurim is from the Kabbalah Chaimer, is from Gzeir Shabbat, from that of the einish of the malacha, which was unnecessary to compare the two ancient that just like there's azar, so over here there's azar. Or the Gemara says you can refute this comparison because mali einish lo. Wait a second, affliction has no categorical permissibility. There's no categorical permissibility of not afflicting yourself in Yom Kippurim. Someone's chayla, that's something else. That's any time that someone's a sakana deraisa. But there's no heter of not to keep the affliction. What are you going to say by malacha that there is categorical permissibility of doing a malacha on Yom Kippurim? So in other words, the einish that it says by malacha is not extra. Because if you're going to come to learn out the einish of malacha from Ina, you could say, wait a second, malacha is more lenient because you're allowed to do malacha on Yom Kippurim by the avoid and the Beis Hamikdash, which are malachas. So maybe I would have thought you're not going to get a punishment for violating malacha on Yom Kippurim because it's hutra mechlala. You're allowed to do malachas for an avoid and Beis Hamikdash. So maybe it's different than Ina. Ina has no permissibility whatsoever, so maybe that's why you get an einish. So of course I'd say einish by malacha. So it's not extra. So back to the question. How do you know the Asara of Inui? You can't tell me you know it from the comparison because you have the extra word mufna by malacha that you're saying einish, which is unnecessary to compare the einish together to say there's Asara. It's not true, it's not extra. You wouldn't know malacha's einish from Inui. So El Rada says the Gemara, okay, the other way around. Lo yemer einish be Inui. Not like we said just before that it shouldn't have said einish by malacha, it shouldn't have said einish by Inui. Why? Because the Gemara malacha, you would know it from malacha. Why? How would you know it? Because ma malacha shurj machlala. If regarding malacha on Yom Kippurim, prohibited activity, you're allowed to do it. We're in the Beis Hamikdash, and yet still onish cars a regular person does so to get the punishment on cars. So ina shurj machlala is regarding ina, which has no permissibility. It's iron. That's it. It's never is it permitted. It's like Koshkin isn't all the more so that it's going to be an einish if you do it. So then lamanelar. So why does it mention the einish of violating Yom Kippurim? Mufna, it's extra. Why is it extra? Lahakish, to compare it to the other thing in the pasuk. It says punishment by Ina, it says punishment by Malacha, which the einish by Ina is extra to compare to the einish Malacha. To tell you, Ma Malacha onish al hizir, just like by Malacha, it gives you a punishment with a warning. Af Ina onish hizir, so too by Ina, although it doesn't say in the Torah the warning, that punishment includes a warning too. The Gemara says no, you can refute that too. Because you can't learn out them from each other, because you could say Mal Malacha, if you can say what we find by doing prohibited activity, which that something applies by Shabbos and Yom Tiv, what are you going to say by Ina that does not have the halacha by Shabbos and Yom Tiv? Maybe that if that's the case, you would not think that you'd be punishment by Ina. You would say no, you wouldn't know it by Malacha, because Malacha is more severe. Malacha is more global. So maybe you would have said, no, it's not extra. You wouldn't know it from malacha, so you have to say ba'ina. So again, back to the question, you have no extra psukim to make these comparisons. So Rad Amar Avina, he says, Hai Tana etzem gama. You're right, it's not learning out from that it's extra words, no extra words. It's from the Gzeir Shavah, they both say the word etzem, be'etzem ayem ezeh. So says the Gemara, mufna, must be that one of these words are going to be superfluous. If they're not superfluous, then you could ask, like we had asked, and says, wait a second. There's always a halacha of mufna. Mufna makes it that it's like, okay, the Torah is obviously telling you something. If there's no extra words, although you could make a Gzeir Shavah, but if we have any questions, we can refute that. And here we obviously have questions because we said Inu cannot really be learned from malacha, malacha cannot really be learned from Inu. So the Gemara says, yes, that la'ai, the truth is afnuya mufna. There's an extra word over here in regards to the halacha of Inui, and therefore that's telling us that you could learn an Gzeir Shavah of Inui from the malacha to tell you that just like malacha, the einish has asara, so over here. How do you say that? Because chamisha korek siv malacha. There's 5 psukim that are written regarding doing malacha on Yom Kippur. 4 are lavin, and 1 says karas, nachemais, and the other parsha. Why does it say 5 times malacha? Okay, so chad lasar di mama. 1's telling you a prohibition that you not do malacha during the daytime, where it says be'etzem hayoyim, that you think it's only during the daytime. Chad lasar deleli, 1 is a prohibition that you not do malacha at nighttime either. One's regarding the punishment of doing malacha during the daytime. One's for punishment at nighttime. As Rashi points out, it only says karas 1 time. How you talking about a punishment 2 times? Because that's what's called an eina inyan. If it's not telling you anything regarding azhara, because it says 4 times allowed doing malacha Yom Kippurim, so if it doesn't teach you anything regarding this, we always know it's a klal. You could use it for something similar. So it's not teaching regarding azhara; it's going to teach regarding the ancient. So 2 times regarding the prohibition of not doing malacha at night and daytime, and 2 times regarding the punishment of doing malacha during the daytime or at nighttime. So that's 4. But it says 1 more. What are you going to do with the 5th time? That's extra. To learn out the halachas of inoi from malacha, to tell you bein the Yoma, bein the lelyon, that it's going to have the halacha of both at nighttime and the daytime, that you're not allowed to go ahead and do a violation of Inui, that's the source. Source number one is a Gzeira Shava. That's actually was the first one was Gzeira Shava Malacha, which we refuted, and the second one said Gzeira Shava Etzem, which we'll learn now. Here it says Etzem, here it says Etzem, and again because that time that it says by Malacha Yom Kippurim, you have an extra pasuk because it says 5 times. 4 would be the 2 Einsh and 2 Azaras. The 5th time is extra to tell you that you can learn out the halachas of Inui from that of Malacha. A third source, the Rabbi Shmuel Tana, he says Nemekan Inui. It says over here in Yom Kippurim Inui, but Nemela Halon Inui. It says over there by Naira Hamayrasa, which is the betrothed maiden. It says the pasuk in Dvarim Chaf Beis Al Dvar She'ines Eishes Re'eh, because he afflicted his friend's wife. Now we learn out the Gzeira Shava from Inui. Malaham Lo Anasham Kin Hizah, just like over there by Naira that there's the punishment only comes because the Torah first gave you a prohibition of Kala Anasham Kin Hizah. Also over here, obviously, that the Torah only gave you a punishment that there was already a prior Azhar. A fourth source, Rav Acha B'Yaakov, he says Yolav Shabbos Shabbosin Mishabbos Bereshis. It says by Yom Kippurim it's called Shabbos Shabbosin, and we know Shabbos Bereshis, meaning the regular Shabbos, is called also Shabbos. So what do we learn now? It's just like regarding Shabbos, the punishment of doing malacha is only with a prior hazara. Also over here that the einish is obviously coming with a prior hazara. Papa, he says a fifth interpretation as he didn't come in base. He says, what do you mean? In other words, you don't need Gzeira Shava to learn out from elsewhere, like from Shabbos Bereshis, from Meinei Ubei, from Yom Kippurim itself, because the pasuk considers it Shabbos regarding the laws of Inui. So therefore, it's going to be like Shabbos for the halachas of Einish and for that of Azhara, that just like Shabbos has the halacha of Azhara, so too is going to be over here. Why? Where do you see that Yom Kippurim is called Shabbos? The Chassidus says in the pasuk in Vayikra, it says there in the pasuk Shabbos Shabbosin Hu Lachem v'Nisim Esnafshe Seichem Atish Lachoidish Pe'er Me'er V'Aderev Tish Besu Shabbatchem. You should keep your Shabbos. Now, you see that in the laws of Inui, it calls it Shabbos. So it's calling it Shabbos, just like Shabbos has, regarding Inui, we call it Shabbos, so too it's going to be like Shabbos regarding the Einish and the Asar, which Rashi just points out. Why is the Gemara bringing the source from the end of the pasuk of Tish B'su Shabbatchem and not the beginning of the pasuk that says Shabbos Shabbosin Hu, that it's called Shabbos? It says Rashi, no, because that's actually needed to teach you all the Inuyim that we learned on Daf Ayin Daled. That's where we learn out the source of it, where it's called Shvais. Or additionally, Rashi says that this that says Shabbos Shabbosin Hu in the beginning of the pasuk is not calling the day Shabbos. It's just saying that it should be a day of rest, meaning of calming down. Whenever it says Lashon Zachar Shabbos Shabbosin Hu, it's a day of Menucha. But the day is not called Shabbos. Therefore, you need the end of the pasuk of Tish B'su Shabbatchem, which is extra to say that no, the day itself is called Shabbos, and to tell you that just like Shabbos has Einish V'Azara, so over here it's going to have Einish and Asar.
Well, why doesn't the Gemara just give us the Azhar with the sources instead of saying that there's no Einish unless there's an Azhar here?
But it doesn't say in the Torah Azhar. Why doesn't the Torah say Azhar? It's a good question. But the Torah doesn't say Azhar, so it's saying where do you know it from?
That there is. The Gemara is assuming that there is an Azhar, even though, but we can't, it doesn't point out what the source is.
Right, no, these are the different, these are the sources.
This
yeah, exactly. This is how we know that there is Azhar. Doesn't say anything in the Torah.
It's coming after Gzeira Shava.
Exactly, either through Gzeira Shava or Hu Gufa Yikri Shabbos. Yeah, that's the source of how we know that there's Azhar. Now, the Gemara just wonders now, Bishlam Rav Papa Rav Acha B'Yaakov. Rav Papa doesn't say like Rav Acha B'Yaakov that to learn out Shabbos Shabbos and Yom Kippurim from Shabbos Bereshis, because the Kodesh said Begufi. If the pasuk itself is telling you that's called Shabbos, obviously it's better than learning it from somewhere else. But Rav Acha B'Yaakov, my Temelam Rav Papa, why doesn't he say like Rav Papa, which he says it says by Yom Kippur? Why are you learning it from somewhere else? Learn out from it itself that says it's called Shabbos. Says Gemara Nami Boile, he needs it like intended to teach you something else or learn another brisa. That actually these words of the pasuk Tish B'su Shabbatchem is actually teaching you, as we'll see at the end of the brisa, to Adu Yom Tovim and not going to Yom Kippur. That's why he doesn't learn that from those words, and if he learns that rather from Shabbos Bereshis. Why? Because the brisa says like this. It says in the pasuk, and this is what we had mentioned on Amud Aleph, that we were told about this concept of Tosei Yom Kippurim, which we were told about to have an Einish and Asar. Where did you ever find out that there is such halacha? And now we're going to teach that halacha. The brisa says in the pasuk, V'nisim es nafshe seichem b'tish l'chaydish. Interesting pasuk. You can afflict yourself on the 9th of the month. the 9th of the month. I thought Yom Kippurim is the 10th of the month. So says the Brayso, Yochel Yaschal B'San B'Tisha. You would think that you should start fasting on the 9th of the month. So it's in the evening. Oh, okay. So it says the evening, you would think the fast only starts after it gets dark when it starts the 10th of the month. No, Tamil Tisha, it says in the 9th. Okay, so you got me. So which one is it? Is it the 9th or is it the evening? Says the Brayso, Maschel Mesana V'Vayim, that it's really the 10th of the month, but you start a little bit earlier in the daytime. This is the source of that we add on from the mundane to the holy, that you have to add on what's called Teisefes Yom Kippur. That's the source of this halach. Now, I would only know that this is in the beginning, in the starting of the Yom Kippur. How do you know the same thing would apply even at its ending? It says the pasuk may erev ad erev, from the evening until the evening. What's ad erev? To tell you that even till that evening, b'chlal, that you add on to the evening of Matzah Yom Kippurim should also go a little bit more. Okay. I would only know that halach applies by Yom Kippurim. The gears is supposed to be over here. Shabbos is minayin. How do we know the same thing applies to Shabbos? Is that there's something called Teisei Shabbos? Tishbasu, which is an extra word. What's Tishbasu? To say Shabbos. Now, Ainli Ela and the gears is Shabbos. Yom Tov minayin. Shabbatchem. Tishbasu is for Shabbos. That's why we're saying that this man, the Amar, couldn't say that you learned it out that it itself is called Shabbos because of Tishbasu Shabbatchem. Because, like we see from this brayso, Tishbasu Shabbatchem is not going Yom Kippurim. Tishbasu is referring to Shabbos, and Shabbatchem is referring to all Yom Tovim. So, okay, it's that how so? It says the brayso. Kamakim shenem shabbos. Wherever it says in the Torah shabbos, refrain, is Meisifin, is the gersa Meisifin Machal al Kodesh that you add on from the mundane to the holy. That's the halachic source of Teisei Yom Kippurim, which also teaches Teisei Shabbos and Teisei Yom Tovim. And again, that's why that mandama couldn't say that you see from here that's called Shabbos, because it's not even going Yom Kippurim. Those were, and again, the beginning of the pasuk Rashi already told us that when it says Shabbos Shabbos, and also wouldn't tell us the ground of the day itself. And the end of the pasuk is also not going Yom Kippurim. Therefore, you have to learn it out from elsewhere. Now, it says the Gemara, the Tana de Etzem. From we brought on an Aleph that from the fact that you had to exclude that the additional part of the weekday that you're not going to get Oynish Lazara, that Tana, the first brayso, which we said learns out from Etzem Gzeira Shava, from Inu from Malacha, which by default we learn if you need a miyut to say that there's no Oynish and there's no Azara of Teisefes, obviously we know that there is halacha of Teisefes Yom Kippur, because you're coming to exclude. Anytime you're excluding, you're obviously inferring that there is such a halacha. So then, that man the Amar, you already know that there is halacha of Teisefes Yom Kippur. So what do you need Batisha for? We were saying it says the 9th of the month to tell you to allude to this halacha that you start already on there Yom Kippur on the 9th. But that man already knows it from his miyutin that he's going to exclude be'etzem hayem ezeh. What's be'etzem hayem ezeh? Not the gzeir shal be'etzem. The other meaning it says be'etzem, which is a itzum shal yom. Oh, you tell me there's only karas? There's only a einish of an or azhara on be'etzem? What do you mean? Oh, you mean to say because there is a halach of tesefes? Obviously, coming to exclude it. So then you don't need a source of betisha to tell you that. You already know that from the fact that you're excluding it, that it doesn't have the punishment, doesn't have azhara. Obviously, there is such a halacha. So then, what do you learn from betisha? Says the Gemara, he needs it for something else. Like the Tani Chia Barab Medif, like Chia Barab Medif, the Torah in the following price. Tani Chia Barab Medif says. The pasuk we quoted before, it says in the pasuk, you should afflict yourselves on the 9th of the month. Anyone fast on the 9th of the month? Well, you fast on the 10th of the month. They come and tell you a famous Haggadik teaching. Whoever eats and drinks on Erev Yom Kippurim on the 9th of the month, the pasuk considers it as if he fasted the 9th and the 10th of the month. So the way you read the pasuk is, when it says V'nisim B'tisha, in other words, it means to say, prepare yourself on the 9th of the month by eating and drinking, so that you have the ability to fast on the 10th of the month. Now, but from the fact that the pasuk uses the terminology of Inui, of the 9th of the month, is coming to tell you, it's as if you fasted on the 9th of the month, which many different interpretations why that is, but because we obviously have the confidence or whatever it is of your preparation. Point is, if you eat in Yom Kippurim, it's as if you actually fasted, because who could eat before the great day of atonement and you're still eating, and obviously you have the betach and whatever. So it's like as if you fasted on these 2 days, the 9th and 10th. That's what he would use for this pasuk, because he already knows Yom Kippurim from the other source. Now the Mishnah said, If you eat foods that are not edible, so then that's not considered a ma'isa achila to be violating the isser of eating Yom Kippur, you're going to be potter. Now, similarly, Amar Rava, it says, Kaspel Pala B'Yom Kippur, if you chew pepper on Yom Kippurim, so that's not really calming a person down, because it's not the normal way of eating, so then potter, you're going to be potter for eating. So the Kasa Yivila B'Yom Kippur potter, if you chew ginger on Yom Kippurim, you're going to be potter. Now, the Gemara asks, is that really so? On the grounding pepper? The Gemara asks from the following brisa. Meir said, Mashmash from the fact that it says in the pasuk, in Vayikra Varaltam Arlasai es period, that you have to consider as arla, it's fruits of the tree's first 3 years. Now, any dish, it's machal, don't I know that it's a fruit tree? You're saying period. Obviously, it means a fruit tree. So why does the pasuk then say that it's a fruit tree? Hello, if it has fruits, it obviously is a fruit tree. Why are you calling it eitz machal? Oh, no, because eitz machal, it's telling you that it's the eitz is a machal. Because it's telling you that it's alluding to an eitz or tree shatam eitz or period shava. That the bark and the fruit actually taste the same. The eitz and the pri, that's called eitz machal. The eitz is the machal. What's that coming to allude to? Zeh pilpulin, that's referring to pepper. Lametcha, the peppercorns. And that's something that the Gemara tells us, eitz or period tam shava. To teach you shapal pollen chayam ba'arla. So it's alluding to you to tell you that it's a type of a tree. The peppercorn grows on the type of a tree, so therefore it has the halachas of arla, that its fruit are forbidden the first 2 years. And it's also teaching you another thing, be'ein Eretz Yisrael chaser klum, that Eretz Yisrael is not lacking anything. It has everything. And because we're talking about in Eretz Yisrael is where the halach of the arla is going to be, in your fruits in Eretz Yisrael, it's saying, and it even has an eitz machal, which is that something like pepper. Shamik says in the pasuk in the bottom, that's the call, but there's nothing missing from Eretz Yisrael. But one thing we see is that pelpulin peppercorns are considered Michael. You just told me a second ago that if someone chews peppercorns on Yom Kippur, it's potter because it's not considered Michael. He said clearly it's called eitz machal. So more like it's not difficult. But a tiftir, when it's moist, so then that's for to be eaten. That's what's considered eitz machal. When we were saying if you chew pepper on Yom Kippur, you're going to be potter, you want dried out pepper. Similarly, the Gemara asked a similar type of a question regarding ginger. Only Ravina Lemremer. He says, how can you say if someone chews ginger and gives me potter? But Rav Nachman, he says, Hai malta. A malta is a type of a dish that they would crush ginger with honey. And they would mix it together. So this malta dish, the asimi behundoi, that comes from Ethiopia, Sharia is permitted. What do you mean it's permitted? There's 2 halachic problems of kashrus that might come up with this dish. First of all, you have bishul akam, which you have the non-Jews cooking this dish. So that's not a problem, says Rashi. Why? Because it's eaten in the raw state. The very big klal in bishul akam is, if something would be eaten in its raw state, and even if it's cooked by a non-Jew, that does not make it prohibited. So, since it's eaten raw, it wouldn't make it proper bishul akam. Additionally, he's alluding to the halacha that there's no problem about gi'ule akam, meaning say you have the tarfus that comes out of their pots, which cooks in the tree for pot, it would be problematic for that. No, because it's nice and tam of gam. It gives a bad taste. Anything else that goes into that dish would give a bad taste, so tam of gam, so therefore that's also not halachically a problem with the evan. Okay, so therefore it's permitted. You're allowed to eat this dish, the malta that comes from Ethiopia. And it says, and you make on it a bar priadam. Okay, because it's something that grows from the ground. But one thing is, in the fact that he says that there's no problem about bishul akam, wait a second, that obviously tells us that ginger is eaten raw, because if it wasn't eaten raw, then they would have a problem about bishul akam. So wait a second, if it's eaten raw, so you should be chayav for chewing the ginger raw on Yom Kippur, because it's eaten raw. So why tell me that you're potter for eating on Yom Kippur? Says Yoma like Kasha, similar type of answer, even though it's not difficult. When did we say that it's a meichel, that's a food item, that even in its raw state, there's no problem about bishul akam? That's when it's moist. When do we say that you're potter for chewing ginger on Yom Kippur? It's about dried out ginger. Dried out ginger is not something that's edible, and therefore someone would be potter for eating that on Yom Kippur. Similarly, the Gemara continues on this theme regarding what's considered edible, what's not. Someone eats the leaves of reeds, potter is potter, but someone eats the shoots of a grapevine, he's chayiv z'michai, because that's considered when it's edible. It says what's considered lulav of gefanim. So Rabbi Yitzchak Magdala says kol shalav lavoi mereshon b'migron, whatever blossom from Rishon till Yom Kippurim, and you're eating on Yom Kippurim, oh, so that's still fresh. That would be considered edible. But if let's say it sprouted before Rosh Hashanah, then it already became hard. It would be like a piece of wood, and then you wouldn't be chayiv for eating that in Yom Kippur. Rav Kahana, he says no, it's kol shleish miyim. It's for a period of 30 days. It says the Gemara, we have a brayso that says like the law that it's actually only for that period of 10 days. Where achal ali kanim patu. The brayso says that if you ate the leaves of reeds, you can be patu. But love if you eat the shoots of a grapevine, you can be chayiv. And Elin love what's considered the shoots of a grapevine is kol shleish miyim. So the brayso is clear, like his opinion. Whatever blossomed from Inda starts to make tshuva, and then you eat on Yom Kippur, it's literally just sprouted. Then it's very fresh, then be a food item, but anything longer than that, even within 30 days, would not be considered that you'd be chayiv. Now the Mishnah said, Shaset Sira Muryas, if you drink the brine or the fish juice, so then you can be patur. Now it says the Gemara, the diuk, because those are not considered things that are generally, that you, as a drink, but a chaymitz, which is definitely more of a drink than those two, vinegar, sounds like chayiv, that you'd be chayiv, because you're only picking Sira Muryas, so you should have said the biggest of the Shabbat chaymitz. So Masnidimani, who's telling the Mishnah that holds that vinegar would be considered a violation of drinking Yom Kippurim? It's Rebbe here. The time of Lina Brisa. Rebbe Yomi says, he says, yes, vinegar, it nullifies the inui, and it calms the person down. So even if it's vinegar, but it's still something that would calm a person down. If someone's desperate, he took that vinegar would calm him down, therefore that would be a violation of inui. Now, Darsh of Gidl B'Amenashim Yiberi Dinerish, he says, Ein halacha Rebbe. He paskin for the kilo, that the halacha does not follow like Rebbe, meaning, chaymitz is like Sira Muryas, your pater. It does not calm down the person, and therefore it's not going to be a violation of Inui. Now, Shana, in the next year, Nafki Kula Alma, so the whole Olam, everyone came out, and Mazgu, what they did was, they took vinegar, but they diluted it with water to weaken the vinegar. V'shasachal, and everyone was drinking vinegar on Yom Kippur. So Shamar Rav Gila heard about this, and he was bothered by this. Amar says, I don't understand. Amer, the Amriana, when did I say this halacha that's not like Rebbe? Is the evidence after the fact. Like it's killing me. Amri, you think I said initially a person allowed to go ahead and drink vinegar on Yom Kippur? Moreover, Amer, the Amriana Porta, when did I say this is not a problem? It's a little bit. Two of me, Amri, you think I said you could just take a whole water bottle of vinegar? And moreover, Amer, the Amriana Chai, when did I say that it's okay? Is when it's raw vinegar. When it's diluted. The Amri did I say, and therefore he says that's not what I had in mind when they said that Allah is not like Rebbe, and therefore that, what people are doing, would be prohibited. Thank you to any time for listening.